Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. The webinar is now starting. Welcome to today's webinar program, Adding Direct Mail to Automated Workflow. My name is Dean D'Ambrosi, Executive Vice President at Epicom, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar today. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded, and all participant lines will be muted during the broadcast. You may receive technical assistance by sending an email to mraymond, M-R-A-Y-M-O-N-D, at epicom.org, E-P-I-C-O-M-M.org, and we will respond promptly. There is also a question feature built into the webinar for questions or requests for technical assistance. Today's presentation will last no more than 60 minutes and includes time for questions. You may ask questions at any time throughout the webinar service using the webinar questions system in the dialog box, which should be to the right of your webinar screen. You may ask questions at any time using this feature, but please be aware that they will not be answered until the end of the presentation. I'd now like to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, AccuZip. It is through the generous sponsorship of that we can provide quality education such as this webinar. AccuZip, Inc. is a national software company based in Atascadero, California. They provide feature-rich solutions to manage contact data quality, address hygiene, UPS postal pre-sorting compliance, and mail tracking and reporting. Their products and services are designed to be utilized across many industry verticals to streamline, standardize, and simplify data entry, data management, and multi-channel communication workflows and processes. AccuZip Technologies makes it easier for businesses to get their message out to the right people at the right location when they need to most. For 23 years, the company has built an outstanding reputation for value, service, and innovation. And now, I'd like to let Steve Belmonte, AccuZip's CEO and the sponsor of today's webinar, introduce today's presenter. Steve?
Hey, thank you, Dean. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Mr. Dwight Kelly, the founder and president of Apago. Apago is a 24-year-old software development and consulting company based in Atlanta, Georgia. They specialize in developing solutions for working with electronic document formats, including Adobe PDF and XML. Customers of Apago include CPI, Card Group, R.R. Donnelley, Blue Tote, Magster, Time, Hallmark Cards, Fidelity, Investments, and Zurich Insurance. Mr. Kelly helped develop and promote many essential international standards, including PDFX, PDFA, PDF-VT, and JDF. Please welcome Dwight.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Steve. Today's topic we're going to talk about is adding direct mail to an automated workflow. So the first question is, what is a mail service? What is direct mail, and how do we implement it? It's a USPS certified service that validates and standardizes addresses of your mail list, calculates the zip+4, updates for change of addresses, removes duplicates, sorts records for optimization and discount, and then creates the required documentation so that the mailing qualifies for discounts. And it involves great government acronyms such as CAS, MCOA, Presort, PAV, and IMB, many of which you're familiar with. Some may not, so I want to send us to mail school. All right, so in 1983, the Postal Service implemented a program that provided mailers with a postal discount for sharing the work to prepare mail for efficient processing. This allowed the Postal Service to provide more cost-efficient mail processing by receiving high-quality addresses from their mailers. So the first acronym is CAS, Coding Accuracy Support System. And it significantly reduces the number of non-deliverable mail pieces. You can verify addresses all the way to the delivery point. You can verify and confirm that the suite and apartment numbers are correct. And you can qualify the addresses for significant discounts. The other one is NCOA, the National Change of Address Database. So over 43 million Americans move every year, and you probably all filled in the little green change of address card with the local post office. But that ensures that you're 100 move update compliant when you update your own mailing list, the names and addresses, with the current change of address information from the Postal Service. And that data is updated weekly to ensure that it has the most current and accurate move data. Continuing with the government acronyms, we have PAVE Gold Pre-Sort. And what that does is it sorts and groups your mailing addresses to maximize your postal discount. It also generates a unique barcode called the IMB barcode for full service discount. And then you have pre-sorts for different classes of mail, such as first class, standard. It creates a piece level barcode as well as tray container tags and pallet placards. And it generates all the required documentation, including statements that are required by the Postal Service when you actually mail your pieces. In addition, a mail service that's PAVE Gold pre-sort certified can also generate the mail.dat file for Postal One. Another service that a mail service house can provide is deduping, and that's where you take your mail list and you actually look for duplicates by name and or address or company name, reducing the number of pieces that you mail to the same location if that's a requirement. All right, so now that we know a little bit about mailing, why would we want to use mail processing inside of our workflow, inside of our print workflow? Well, there's a couple scenarios. Nowadays, we have variable data, and variable data where every impression that the press or printer generates is unique. We can now print things that used to have to be done separately, like labels. So now we can do direct on-piece printing of addresses and barcodes, as well as inkjetting of both the pieces and the envelopes. We may want to batch smaller jobs together to qualify all of the pieces for those jobs for pre-sort. And I'll get into that in some more detail in a minute. So it's going to be cheaper to batch jobs that have similar requirements together than it would be without. The last scenario that we'll cover today is we have a digital press. Why would we want to do any kind of handiwork after the press if we can automate before then to optimize the output on the digital press? So by combining our mail list with our digital pieces and our variable data, we basically can now print and mail pre-sort order instead of job order. So we've combined the similar jobs together, combined their mail list together. We've been sorted it using the pre-sort capability of the mail service, and now coming off the press, we print in mail sort order, basically tray order, instead of customer job order. And that can save a significant amount of post-press manual labor. All right, I want to talk about some of the common mistakes that automation can help you avoid. And one of them is the address block. In a lot of cases, customers are now downloading templates and customizing them, or maybe they're even doing customization online using an editing tool that's built into your web-to-print store. There are specific requirements for the address, the barcode, and the return address must go on letters and flat. In this example down here, I've color-coded them. On letters, the barcode must be located below or above the address, at least half an inch from the left edge and the right edge, and between 5/8 of an inch and 4 inches from the bottom. The barcode can also be placed in the bottom right corner of the piece, and all design elements, including text and graphics, must be kept away. So these colored areas are exclusion zones. And one of the things I did for one of my customers was to actually examine the piece in the workflow to make sure that the customer had not inadvertently added any elements, for an example, a sample address in these areas, so that these were totally ink-free areas and met the requirements of the post office. And in an automated workflow, we can do that type of verification of the piece and route the job if there's a problem for correction. So the post office separates mail into 4 categories: cards, letters, flats, and parcels. And each of those categories has different postal rates and standards. So if you pick the wrong mail type, it can cost you money. Cards are the least expensive to mail. A flat is about 50% more expensive to mail than a card. And if a piece exceeds the size of a letter, you can possibly reduce your cost by trying a different layout or maybe folding the piece. This is, again, something that an automated workflow can verify for you. We know the size of the pages in a PDF file. And so if your order coming in asks for a card size, for instance, and the piece size, the PDF page size actually exceeds the dimensions of that, we can route the file to prevent it from accidentally being sent out and printed incorrectly.
And Dwight?
Yes.
You make great points, and it's very important, and this is missed, and I know you have created this workflow where it is the finished piece size, not the printed piece size and thickness. The thickness is key. If you do a trifold versus a letterfold, there's logic in a workflow that you can create to make sure that the calculations going back to the pre-sort are based on the finished piece thickness and size.
Yes, and actually I was getting ready to cover that in this slide. So another example of something that can go wrong is using the wrong weights or thicknesses. So if you exceed the maximum weight of a first-class piece, which is 2 ounces, or a standard mail piece, which is 3.3 ounces, it can cost you thousands of dollars. So you need to verify the weight and maybe change to a lower weight paper, lower basis weight paper, to lighten the piece's weight. And the same for the final thickness of the mail piece. I did a workflow for a customer where they basically gave me a SKU, and then they gave me a database which contained the paper type, the paper weight, the paper thickness, and then I was able to dynamically calculate the final weight of the piece as well as the final thickness of the piece dynamically. And so rather than a CSR having to calculate and enter these values into a job ticket, the workflow automatically looked it up and then sent that information, that calculated value, to the mail service as part of its submission, its quote. All right, everybody hates paperwork, and doing paperwork with the government can be even more painful. They're not very tolerant of mistakes. So filing your paperwork with the Postal Service that contains mistakes is a sure way to delay your mailing and increase your costs. Using electronic documentation, such as the mail.dat standard, and uploading that to Postal One, you can claim full service discounts. And by doing so, your annual permit fees, currently $225 annually, will be waived. So a mail service should be able to generate both the filled-in paperwork based on the quotes that you've given it for the mailing, as well as the mail.dat file that we can upload to Postal One. So that's a fully electronic delivery. All right, let's talk about workflow solutions. So automated workflows allow you to work smarter, not harder, 24/7. It may be the differentiator between a printer nowadays that's successful and one that may fail. So what's a web-to-print mail service? Well, it typically performs at least the following operations. It collects orders from customers using an e-commerce storefront. It submits orders to a workflow backend. Orders are converted to jobs. Documents are created, converted, pre-flighted, and processed in various ways. Job tickets may be created. Jobs may be batched according to like characteristics. Mailing addresses are processed using a mail service. Variable data is processed using a variable data engine. Batch jobs are imposed, and imposed jobs, labels, envelopes are submitted to the printer or digital press, and then hopefully we profit. So here's a graph. We have our front end, our storefront. The user may upload a customized template, or like I said earlier, customize it online. The storefront generates a quote. They then add it to their cart and check out. That is sent to the back end, this automated workflow for processing. We traditionally call that pre-press. That may include things like pre-flighting, some automated corrections, generation of job tickets in position, and then finally we go to production, into the finishing stages, shipping, and then billing. So what type of workflows are out there? Well, there's several single vendor solutions, and what I mean by that is it's an all-in-one solution. A good example is a product called Presswise. It offers an all-in-one suite, including the web-to-print storefronts, the MIS system, the integrated mail services, and a pre-press print workflow. It's actually in the cloud, as they say nowadays. It's a software as a service, and hence it's constantly updated with new features. And it lowers the capital cost to start to zero, because basically you're not having to buy hardware and software. You're just subscribing to a service. And they charge a monthly fee based on your usage. So no development is required. Another example is ESI Printsmith, which is targeted at small printers. It offers different modules, including web-to-print storefronts, estimating, scheduling, and job production. Finally, Xerox FreeFlow is a kind of a WYSIWYG workflow designer toolset that includes web-to-print, variable data, pre-press workflows, and automated finishing. So all these are single vendor solutions, although you possibly could add some modules before or after these solutions. Typically everything from the ordering all the way to the back end is handled by a single vendor. So what's the alternative? I would say the alternative is DIY. And traditionally that meant you had to go out and hire experienced programmers, do product specifications, do a long development and test. But nowadays you have components, and these components can be assembled together. And one component, for instance, is Chili Publish. So Chili Publish is a web component. I think of it kind of like an InDesign for the web that allows you to integrate editable templates and variable data directly into your web storefront. If you wanted to come up with your own DIY storefront, I've used eBay's Magento storefront quite successfully. Very, very powerful storefront. And Chili Publish plugs into that. So when the user adds a product that they want to customize to their cart, the Chili editor pops up, works just like InDesign. In fact, you can actually upload InDesign templates to it, and it retains all editability. And it even supports variable data. So in this case, the customer's provided a CSV file, and they can actually preview by clicking on the different records, preview the variable data here. Another example of a DIY component is Infocus Switch, which I'll be talking about for the rest of the presentation. Switch is a very useful tool. It is basically just a framework that lets you create your own workflows. It comes from a pre-press background. It's not necessarily only useful for pre-press. So while the majority of people use it for grabbing files from folders or web front ends or FTP servers and then routing them, sending notifications, converting to PDF, pre-flighting, and then storing the files, it's much more useful for that than that. So let's talk about Switch. Switch has 9 modules. The only one that's required is Core. That basically gives you the basic functionality to build workflows. Configurator is kind of interesting. It's a module that most customers would purchase, and it gives you access to a wide variety of third-party software. An example of that is InDesign. So Switch is able to call InDesign to do a variety of things, including convert InDesign to PDF. And the configurator module gives you all these elements that you can use to call these third-party products. Database modules pretty self-explanatory. If you need to access databases, SQL databases, you would purchase that module. Metadata gives you access to XML files, XMP metadata, CSV files. Scripting is very powerful, and it's a place I live quite a bit, being more of a programming geek. Scripting lets you basically customize Switch to the 10th degree. It lets you do all kinds of programming, and it's not traditional programming, so don't be afraid of it. It actually uses JavaScript, but you can do some amazing things with the scripting engine. And these others are optional. I won't really cover them that much, but it has 9 modules. Most customers will purchase Core and Configurator, and then one of these 3 modules here based on their needs. All right, so I'm going to do my own DIY with Switch for you in a demonstration. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Switch. And again, this can apply to any type of workflow product, such as the Xerox free flow product. I'm going to build a basic pre-press workflow. I'm going to add variable data to it. I'm going to then add mail services to it. I'm going to add some fairly sophisticated batching, and then finally I'll show you how we can send these to the press using JDF. All right, so can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir, it looks good.
All right, so this is Switch. It looks a little intimidating at first, but basically they use this idea of panes. So in this case, I have a list of flows. These are my logical groupings of my workflows, basically. And I can have one or as many of these as I want. I can have flows called flows. It's up to your imagination how many flows you need. To create a new flow, I would just say new flow. In this case, I have one already created. Over here, I have all my flow elements. So these are what I build flows with. And this is provided by both the core module as well as the configurator module I mentioned earlier. The simplest flow in Switch is you just simply drag out 2 folders and you double click and you connect them up. And you'll see there's a little directional arrow here. And so when I run this flow, anything I copy into this folder is automatically copied to this folder. It's that simple. The brilliance of Switch is because of these flow elements, I can add some fairly sophisticated processing very easily. So for instance, if I wanted to also receive files from an FTP server or from a mail client, I just simply add it like that. Everything I click on has properties. So a folder has different properties than a mail received. If you look at mail received, you'll notice it has specific things like what type of mail connection, the address of the server, the username and passwords, how often to pick up the emails, whether to get the attachments, etc. Where an FTP server is different. It's going to have, obviously the type of server and the address and credentials, but it's going to have more about what directories to pick up from, how deep to go down. And then the simplest one is going to be the output folder because that's where I'm just storing things. So in that case, my only option really is, do you want to overwrite or add some type of unique suffix, a version number, or fail? Now, in Switch, I can build logic. And let's say I wanted to take incoming files in, and I want to sort them into PDF files and anything else. So what I do is I just connect 2 lines up here. Now, if I ran it right now, both of these connection lines are set to all jobs. So a PDF file would go here and here. So what I need to do is apply a little bit of filtering on these connection lines. And the way I do that is I just say include, and I tell it the type of files that I want to include. So in this case, I want to say PDF. Now on this other connection line, I could list all the other file formats, but they have a shortcut, and I'm just going to say all other jobs. Now, if I got an InDesign file and I wanted to convert to PDF, PDF being my end product, what I can do is do the same thing. So I'm going to connect these guys up here, and I'll throw in a Illustrator also, like that. And then obviously on this connection line, I want to say include only InDesign documents. And on this connection line, I want to do the same thing, but I want to say Illustrator documents. Then if I click on InDesign, you'll see the properties changes. Again, this is customized just for InDesign. And so probably what I want to do is I want to save as a PDF document. It actually goes out and gets a list of the InDesign PDF presets that you created. I'll choose PDFX4. And then I can tell it to fail if the fonts or the images are not available. And I can do the same thing on Illustrator. Okay. Now you notice that on this connection line it looks different, and that's because these two elements here can fail. We said they could fail if it's not the correct file type or it's missing images or fonts. And so in this case, the green light, traffic light, means succeeded. And so all I need to do is add a folder here and change that to error. You'll see now it's a red traffic light. Now I'm sorting files based on their success or failure. And then if they failed, I probably want to notify someone. So I'll just add a little mail send here. And then maybe when it's done, I'll store it in an error jobs folder. Like that. So that's just a quick overview of Switch. It's very, very powerful. I've not done any programming at all here. This is all WYSIWYG. Just click and drag, connect up, set the properties. You can run the flow and test it out. So now I wanted to show you some pieces of a mail services flow that I've done for a customer. If you look at this, it's actually very similar to what I just did. We have files coming in here. If it's already PDF, it goes to this location. If it's Illustrator, InDesign, or Photoshop, they get converted to PDF and sent up here. However, if any kind of error occurred, they'll go here. So what I end up with is converted PDF files here using the Adobe preset. And then I'm going to run pit stop server, and I'm going to specify the pre-flight profile. For instance, are all fonts correctly embedded and of the correct type, or images of sufficient resolution, or there are no white overprinted elements, etc., page sizes. And if it succeeds, it's going to route the file here. And again, if the pre-flight failed, it will route it down here and eventually notify an operator that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So we talked about integrating into electronic storefronts. So this is an example of a flow that goes out to that Magento storefront and grabs files. In this case, it's using just simple SFTP to get the files. The files are actually a zip file that contains the XML from the order, as well as optionally a CSV file for the mail list. This particular customer, rather than using Chili for their online editor, uses a product called Silicon Publishing, which is based on the Adobe InDesign server. And what I'm doing is I wrote a little script here to actually go out to their web services API and say, give me a high-res PDF file for this job. And so they actually generate that PDF dynamically and then send it back to me, and it enters the workflow at this point. I then generate a job ticket, which is the 8x11 sheet that's got a preview of the job as well as a bunch of information about the order itself, including barcodes. That job ticket gets mailed to a CSR, where the PDF file itself is pre-flighted and then sent to an Indigo Press via JDF. Taking that a little further, if we wanted to add in variable data, like I mentioned, this Magento order can optionally contain a CSV file mailing list. So right here, basically, we go out and route the PDF this way for pre-flight and sending to the press, but we also take the CSV file and bring it down here and then use SmartStream Designer BDP, which is an Adobe InDesign plugin, to generate mailing labels from the CSV file. And then those mailing labels are imposed and sent to the Indigo Press also. There's no mail services in here. It actually takes the raw CSV file provided by the customer and uses this VDP template to generate the mailing labels. So what if we wanted to leverage these, a service such as AccuZip to do mail processing, to do all those government acronyms of CAS and NCOA and PAV pre-sort? Well, all we have to do is add this to our workflow. So what does this do? Well, we talked about the CSV file comes down this way. The first thing we need to do is upload that to AccuZip. So AccuZip has a very good web services API that I was able to leverage. And we wrote this configurator here for AccuZip. And it has operations. And one of the first things we want to do is upload the CSV file to their service. So we choose the upload file. When you sign up for the service, either to evaluate it or to actually use it for production, you'll be assigned a API key. So this actually uploads the raw mailless CSV file to AccuZip. The next thing we need to do is tell AccuZip something about the mailing. And so we have an operation called update quote. And basically it sets all the parameters for the mailing. So the class of the mail, the zip code we're mailing from, the piece type being card, letter, flat, or parcel, the dimensions and the weight, the thickness, some information about whether we want to generate barcodes, carrier route codes, information on your permits, the mailing agent, the list owner, the mail date, whether we want to dedupe or not. Quite a bit of information. Yes.
Yeah, some of the important stuff would be the mailer ID. So you can use your own mailer ID, and the uniqueness of that serial number is kept automatically through the cloud. So if you want to use your own MID in the printed barcode, you can do that as well. And the unique values are, because that's required by the post office to have those uniqueness within that 45-day period. And then all your by-4s are also taken care of here.
Great, thank you, Steve. So one important thing is Switch is dynamic. It's meant to pull data from what I call data silos. So a data silo would be that order information coming from our web storefront or from our CRM, as well as calculated values. So in this example, I've actually got Switch set up to just use static values. It would run every job using these parameters, and that's probably not correct. So the way Switch works is, for instance, this mailer ID here, rather than being the static value of all nines, what we can do is we can go into the job, and Switch has a fairly sophisticated variable capability. And what this lets me do is actually go into the job and pull out information. So for instance, the XML file that's coming from your storefront may have the customer's mailing ID. So we could actually go into that XML file and do a lookup and retrieve their mailer ID. Or, for instance, on the weights and heights, as I mentioned earlier, we can actually do calculations. So we could go out to a database, look up a SKU for the product that we're printing, get the paper type, look up the paper type, and get the thickness and weight of a sheet of that paper. We can then calculate the number of sheets for that job, and then dynamically fill in these values here also. So that's where the workflows can really leverage these data silos. All right, so we've uploaded the CSV file. We've now set all the parameters for the mailing. The next thing we need to do is tell AccuZip, the mail service, to actually process the file. We could actually go in and call each of these different processes, the CAS, the NCOA, the deduping, and the pre-sort separately, but we can also tell it to do them all at one time. And since we're running deduping, we need to tell it the type of dedupe. Are we just doing it based on address, first and last name, the household name, or the company name? So once we run this element, we send that information up to AccuZip. AccuZip does all the crunching, and they tell us when it's ready. So this will sit here with this job, and it can run as many jobs simultaneous as you need. Each of them runs independently in Switch. once it's done, we get here, and in this case, we're going to download the processed CSV file. And the CSV file is going to go through what I showed you earlier. So it's going to do the VDP, the imposition, the mailing labels, and the sending of the Indigo Press via JDF. So the difference between this, which is just the raw, unprocessed mailing labels with no barcodes, no pre-sorts, no change of addresses, to this is simply dropping in these 4 elements right here into your workflow.
Yeah, Dwight, and that is a Postal One verified. So you just push it up to Postal One, and you're done. It does the validation and everything.
So I talked earlier about batching. I wanted to show this workflow right here. I have a customer that their front end generates an XML file that looks like this. So I have the job ID, I have the quantity, the weight, the product type, the size, the paper, the color, the printer, the coding, the finishing. But I also have information on whether it's a mailed piece, and then the mail label, the actual mailing list database here, the postage type, and whether it can be combined with other jobs, as well as the artwork itself, in this case, the postcard that they're actually printing for the customer. I can use this information right here to sort jobs that are similar to each other. They can be run together on the press, right? So it has the same product type, it's the same paper, it's the same paper color, the same printer, the same coding and finishing. And then I also probably want to take into account the postage type, because obviously I don't want to mix up postage classes. So what happens in this flow is I receive that XML job that contains the XML, the raw CSV mailing list, and the PDF file for the postcard. And I pre-flight the postcard. I save the PDF off into an archive for later processing. And then I just use a trick of switch where I can use something called hierarchies, which we would think of them as directories, to retrieve information from both the job as well as the XML file to create a simple batching capability. So the first thing I want to do is I want to sort mailed pieces and non-mailed pieces. And I've already showed you how to do this. We just click on this line. But in this case, I have a condition. So what I'm saying here is go into that XML file and look up the mailed piece. And that's a value that has either yes or no. I showed you that just a minute ago. So if we go back in here, we're basically going in right here, and that's either a yes or no. And so if that value in the XML file is equal to yes, we want to send it here. Otherwise, we want to send it here. Simple sorting. But within that, I wanted to sort it into various buckets. So the top bucket is the printer model, the paper type, the paper size, whether it's coded or not, and the mail class. And the way I do that is right here. So again, I'm leveraging switch variables. So in this case, I'm actually going in and grabbing the paper type out of the XML. Here, I'm going and grabbing the size, the coding, etc. But some of these are a little more complicated. So what I did is I wrote a little JavaScript expression to basically go in and look at the printer specification in the XML. So if we look at that, it's this printer specification. And the customer said if it's set to no preference, default to the HP Indigo. And I couldn't do that using variables very easily. So what I did is I just wrote a little piece of JavaScript to go out and get the value from the XML file. And then if it's set to no preference, default to the Indigo. And I did that here also for the coding. So they have codings with and without UV, and they have several different kinds of codings. So when in this case what I'm doing is I'm looking at the value of coding, and then if it doesn't contain UV, I set the value to no coding. So I don't really care as long as it doesn't have UV. So that's what builds this directory tree here. So what ends up in this bottom level directory is all the pieces that have the same type of processing, both the press, the paper, the size, the coding, finishing, and also the mail class. And what can I use that for? Well, we can use it for a batcher. And so this is a script I wrote for the customer that goes out and looks at all these directories and has some parameters. So in this case, it scans every 2 minutes, looking for 4 or more jobs, or any single job quantity that exceeds 5,000. Or if the job has been in this batch for over an hour, it will actually kick it out. So 4 more jobs, a single job with more than 5,000, or any job that's been waiting more than an hour to run will be picked up. We then combine the mail list together. So we're actually taking potentially 4 or 10 mail lists and actually combining them together. And I'm actually adding some additional columns to the CSV file to uniquely identify every record so that I can know what order it came from as well as what template it's supposed to be using in the variable data system. And then I just go through the same mail processing that I just showed you. So in this case, yes.
That's key, because by adding that additional column on the duplicate detection part on the, it's important to add the job ID to that key so that if you have the same address, name and address in multiple jobs, they're retained in each job. So that's brilliant.
Yep. So what we're showing up here is basically picking up order information, processing files, and batching them logically together. And then here we're actually grabbing the batches, creating them, combining their mail list together, uploading them to AccuZip's mail service, setting the quote values, again, based on the order information, processing the list for CAS, NCOA, pre-sort, and PAV. And then in this case, we're actually downloading the CSV file here and sending it to an XMPy variable data engine. And if we look at the generated CSV file, we'll see that AccuZip actually adds some additional columns that we can use in the variable data. So in this case, it added a carrier route code. It added the barcode as well as the IMD barcodes. So now we can actually print that directly onto the piece. And then we actually here are just downloading the postal documentation. Like I said earlier, a good mail service would actually create this for us. In this case, it's a fully filled in, a fully filled in PDF file with all the information that we used during the update quote step in our workflow. So this is fully filled in here. And then finally, we talked about mail.dat. So in that case, what we end up with is a zip file. And inside the zip file is our documentation we just looked at, as well as our container tags. So here's all our container tags ready to go. And then the rest of this is the information required to upload a Postal One. So Steve, that pretty much covers what I was going to talk about. Any comments or questions?
No, it's just, the combining of the CSVs is critical because especially when you don't have a job that may qualify for, let's say, 100 records or something, and you like for real estate companies and they're dropping in their farms, to have those thresholds set at 5,000 or whatever, anything above 200, all of that, those mail pieces can be sorted together to get the maximum postal discounts. It will also support breaking out postage for each one of the agents or each one of the jobs, even though they're consolidating all of them. So there's a lot of benefit to that combined part of it, and I think that's just really brilliant because a lot of people just stick with the fact that they're going to run one list and not be able to combine those jobs, and you've made it very simple here, Dwight. Great job. And then we'd like to go ahead and, if we can, is take some questions from the audience if they have any. Hopefully they'll have quite a few, and we're here to answer any of your questions.
Hey, yeah, Steve, this is Dean D'Ambrosi. Welcome. Thanks again to you and Dwight for the presentation. This would be the area where we will open it up for question and answers. And we do have a couple of questions here that have been asked by our attendees. The first one is, if I'm understanding this properly, and I think I'm hearing that this technology will allow me more options for grouping my work by expanding the definition of what we traditionally view as like jobs. I'm no longer limited because of the variable data allows me to group a larger number of jobs together that were once thought to be different. Is that correct, and can you expand on this?
Well, first of all, grouping, having more records as far as your pre-sort is concerned, we're going to get deeper discounts right off the bat. And what technique Dwight has shown here is that when your imposition is done, Dwight, correct me if I'm wrong, that multiple pieces, of course, based on the artwork, would print on the same sheet. And of course, with the postal part of it, we're going to print that in a north-south order. So when we give you the print-ready file, if you're running which you can define in here, if you're running at 20 up on a sheet, for example, we're going to print card number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the upper left corner. But ganging them together are going to get you deeper discounts. And Dwight, you can speak on the part of the composition part.
Sure.
With the multiple artwork.
Right. So, I mean, this is just one customer's requirement. They wanted to be able to take jobs that could be physically printed together based on these characteristics, right? You obviously can't print jobs that are on different papers or on different presses or different coatings or different mailings. So we use Switch to batch jobs together based on these important characteristics. And then by batching their mail lists together and using a variable data system that allows us to change the way we're printing, the order we're printing from job order, we're printing, page 1 of job 1, page 2 of job 2, and having to do the postal sort afterward, and also not being eligible for the larger mailings discounts, we can increase our batch size to qualify for the discount, and we can now print on a digital press in mail order. So the pieces coming off the press are in mail order, not in job order. So you literally can just take it right off your finisher, grab them, and put them into a tray, and we also provide the tray labels for you.
All right. We do have another question that's just come in here. It says, how many jobs coming in daily does it take to really justify getting into this level of programming, especially if you would need to add technical staff to manage these types of flows?
Well, Dwight, are there, on the flows themselves, there should be some standard flows, some standard workflows that could be, so that it's not created from scratch, for example. You've got many of them. Yeah.
So if we just took this flow, for instance, here, the only area that's really programming would be if your update quote had to be dynamic. So you're actually looking for values and having to do calculations and that type of thing. If your XML file coming from your front end actually could put all the correct values in the XML, or it was in a database, you can do that without any programming at all. I just wanted to show you how you can write some custom programming to solve some hard problems, or in one case, simplify the design of the workflow. But everything I here is just WYSIWYG. The AccuZip configurator ships with Infocus Switch, as well as all these other configurators. The batcher is something that you probably would need to have your Switch reseller actually help you with. So that would require some custom programming, I guess, for that. As far as the amount of jobs, I don't know, Steve, you know more about minimums for qualifying for discounts.
Well, in my view, if you really want to be successful and scale and really increase your revenue significantly, automating your workflows the way you do it today and putting it into a workflow, take the way you're doing your manual procedures and putting it in now, even if there was one job, if your business plan is to grow and to scale, there's no other way you can do that than through automation. If you wait to the point where you're literally working 10 hours, 12 hours a day to get your jobs out when things could be automated where it could cut that physical labor, manual labor down. I would recommend creating a workflow when you don't need it versus creating a workflow when you do need it. So creating a workflow will help you then go out, gain new business, and add it into your workflow. And like I always say when I go to these webinars is specialize, have a niche in something. Specialize in postcards. Specialize in, and that's all you do, or specialize in real estate, where you have a niche and you're really good at something. That'll go all in line with this workflow and printing the same job on the same press on the same paper. So then you can start pushing jobs like that in marketing, things you're really good at through the workflow, and then you can add on to the workflow if you want to get into new areas. But I would definitely recommend the workflow, whether it's one job or many, so you can grow your business and scale faster.
I guess it also depends on how big your typical mailing is, right, Steve? If you're sending out hundreds for each job versus thousands for a single job, then this type of batching workflow could save you quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and even if you have large jobs which met the threshold by themselves, hopefully your jobs are perpetual, right? So you have a customer that mails monthly or maybe weekly, 9 times a year, every other month or something, and then, but they do jobs with you all the time. These, you can set up, for example, FTP folders. So and you set up one for each one of your customers, and as they drop files into an FTP, the workflow could pick it up from there and at least prepare your mail, because you can preset those letter size, you can preset the flat size and all of that, and then it just runs through that flow with just a point and click. The cool thing about the configurator for direct mail is it figures out your container volume sizes automatically based on your thickness. So as long as you fall within a letter or fall within a flat, all we need is the finished thickness size, and that's it. All the container volume information is already calculated for you, whether it's going in an MM tray, an EMM tray, a sack, on a pallet, whatever. So I would say if you have one job that has 5,000 records and they run it every week, the automating a workflow will eliminate mistakes and manual processes that you have to do each time, which costs money, where you could be doing something else.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Dwight. I have another question here. Can I build the filing and distribution of the postal and other documentation electronically directly into the workflow as jobs are completed? Okay, so are they referring to like the job setup information, like the XML on describing what they're going to do with a job? Well, I'm sorry. I'm getting that they're talking about any type of filing of postal documentation. I guess the post office, the mail docs. Yeah, sure. Sure. So there's multiple download options. You can download the zip file, which contains everything, including mail.dat, or you can download specific components of the mailing. Like, for example, you can download a preview of the print ready. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah. Yes. Okay, you can hear me, great. So basically you can download, like we have a preview option which gives you the first 25 or random 25 records, so you can do it in a kind of like a buy now situation on your website where you can show a preview of the card or whatever. So you can download different components of the result. Print preview, print ready, PDFs of the hard copy documentation, the mail.dat, etc. Okay. Hopefully that answers this question. Yes, if it didn't answer your question, please ask a follow-up in the dialog box so that we can make sure we get your questions answered. We do have another one, Dwight and Steve. We have a homegrown address data optimizer solution. Can we integrate this with Switch? You could. I missed as far as a homegrown. We have a homegrown address data optimizer solution. Does that mean that it's can be integrated? Okay. Well, if their homegrown one is, remember, to get postal discounts, and I believe they're probably referring to getting a postal discount and running it through the workflow would have to be CAS certified, and then of course for flat size mail has to be PAVE Gold certified to run through that. But as far as adding it to the workflow, pretty much anything you can dream of, you can add to the workflow.
Yeah, so I actually dropped for 1 second, so I apologize. I showed the workflow before we added AccuZip was using variable data in Switch with a CSV file, which could be your homegrown addresses. It's just not going to leverage all the address manipulation, updating, and sorting that a mail service like AccuZip would provide for you.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of our questions here. I'll give one more second while I'm wrapping up here to see if there's any more questions. I'm not. Nope. I'm not seeing any additional questions. So with that, I'd like to say that this concludes today's program, and we'd like to thank everyone for their participation. We'd also like to once again thank the webinar sponsor AccuZip, who is part of the Epicom Member Advantage Discount Program. So if there are additional things that you're interested in with regards to the AccuZip programming, we do have special programming through Epicom that you can take advantage of. This webinar has also been recorded as a reminder as well, and it will be uploaded and available in the Members Only Connected Community site in the next couple of days. So if you're interested in getting the recording of this webinar, by all means, you can log in there and you'll be able to get that in the connected community within the next few days. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, thank everyone for their time today, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank you.